Good morning to all of you. In preparation of Chag Shavuot, next Motzei Shabbat, I decided to speak today about how to be motivated, how to be stimulated during these very challenging times. After all, Chag Shavuot is not just a reenactment of an event that happened so many years ago. Of course, we celebrate and we're happy to have received the Torah. What most Jews unfortunately forget is that Chag Shavuot is special because it is a recommitment. It's supposed to be a recommitment to our values, to our way of life, to the Torah and to the mitzvot. It's not b'mikre, it is not just by chance that Parshat Behar Bechukotai comes out always around this time of the year, as we're about to receive the Torah. Parshat Behar, we are in the mountain of Sinai, we are receiving the mitzvot, we are gathered all together as a nation to hear directly the voice of Hashem, to which we respond, of course, later on, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're all excited, we're all committed, we're all ready for it. We have no doubt, we don't question it. But if you read Parashat Bechukotai, you may have asked yourself, how could it be that one of the most difficult statements that Hashem makes in Parashat Bechukotai, amongst others, in the Tochacha, in all the rebuke that He gives us of what He anticipates will be the future, that many Jews will part ways, will become distant from the Torah uses a very, very sad expression that there will be Jews that unfortunately betorati yimasu, they will despise my Torah. And I always ask myself, and it always troubles me, how could it ever be that someone who was so close, who was really in love with Judaism, who did not ever question it, whose parents or grandparents perhaps were willing to give their lives for it, how could one at some point in his life or in his children's life, future generations, let go of it as though nothing ever occurred, as though it doesn't exist, to the point of where he despises? You know, despise doesn't only mean not to fulfill, to stop keeping, to stop observing. Lim'os or tig'al nafshechem, which is even worse, means that you will be disgusted with it. You will not want it, you will not respect it. How could that ever happen, that a Jew will not respect what his forefathers respected and gave their lives for? And that is what Parshat Bechukotai partially is about, describing to us in detail what will happen as a result, how Hashem will have to deal with it, unfortunately. And we have experienced many holocausts and many difficult times in our history because of that lack of respect. But the question is, how does it happen? For those of you who attended the shul, towards the very end of Parshat Bechukotai, the custom of many Jewish communities is to get up and say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek. Many communities, not all, but many communities have that custom of saying those famous words. Perhaps you never thought about it, but what do those words mean and why do we say it? Well, the translation is easy. The translation is, let us all be strong and let us all be strengthened in the future. But why do we say those words at the end of reading of the Torah, at the end of the last parasha of a sefer, when we just finished Sefer Vayikra? What do those words mean? Rabbis tell us in the Gemara Masechet Berachot, Arba'at Tzrichim Chizuk. There are 4 occupations, perhaps we can call them. There are 4 things that every Jew involves himself with throughout his life that constantly need chizukim. Arba'at tzrichim chizuk. Torah, ma'asim tovim, tefillah, and derech eretz. The learning of Torah, good deeds, which means, of course, the observance of mitzvot, prayer, and derech eretz. Derech eretz could mean profession, it could mean other things. These are occupations, important things in our life that require chizukim. Chizukim means they require continuous motivation. People are not steadily motivated on a regular basis. When it comes to occupations, there's something called in English burnout. You liked something. You were excited about it the first day you went to work. But what happens eventually? Burnout. In order to avoid burnout, rabbis tell us it requires chizukim, constant motivation, inspiration. Why am I doing this? What are the benefits of doing this? There are many ways to be motivated when it comes to profession, to a career. When it comes to Torah, obviously we need to know the benefits of Torah, how beautiful it is, how special it is, what it does for us. It's not just an exercise in observance of certain routines. It is our connection with God. Nevertheless, it requires motivation. Same is true with prayer. Some people rush through prayer. Not everybody values the power of prayer. We're actually talking to Hashem, and He's actually listening. And people don't realize that He's actually listening to us. Especially if it's a prayer in a minyan, especially if tears are being shed, and in all sincerity we express those words and we really mean them, of course He listens. There's no doubt about it. Ma'asim tovim, good deeds. Good deeds, of course, sometimes we're tired. Sometimes we're not in the mood of helping or doing chesed, of visiting someone who's sick, of going to a house of mourning. These are all good deeds and examples of chesed that require motivation. We need to be stimulated because we're tired. We have other things to do. We're busy. So the rabbis remind us these are things that need constant motivation. Otherwise, we lose interest. And we're not as excited as we used to be in the past. Imagine if the rabbis said that about Torah or Ma'asim Tovim. Obviously, we can understand how this happens in real life in other areas. In other areas, people are so excited with their first iPhone. Right? They spent a few $100s to get this latest gadget. And after a while, they get tired of it. All these technological gadgets, all these things that bring excitement to people, a new car, a new home, new furniture, these are things that we can understand and relate to how they lose value and interest in our life. But here the rabbis are telling us it's not just the material and physical things that we can identify, that after a while they're not so exciting and so interesting. We're talking about spiritual things, valuable things. Torah, Ma'asim Tovim, Tefillah, Derech Eretz. All these things are spiritual in nature. For us to, God forbid, lose interest in them, that at some point we're no longer excited to pray, no longer excited to do a good deed, that is, of course, troublesome. Part of the reason why this happens is because in life there are aliyot v'yiridot. There's no doubt, nobody can say that he does not have ups and downs in his life. Life is full of challenges. Life is full of all kinds of difficulties that we have to deal with. And it's not easy. There are times we're weak. There are times that our resolve is not as strong as it was in the past. And it's not because we're getting older necessarily. It doesn't have to do with physical strength. It has to do with stamina. And stamina sometimes is lacking only because we're not motivated. And we don't get up in the morning not because we did not have enough sleep. It's because we're not so excited. We don't have as much interest. Or we've lost respect, chas v'shalom, for something. And this could happen, chas v'shalom, also between husband and wife. They got used to each other. They got used to each other, and they sometimes forget the very important details that make relationships fresh and vibrant. We forget about it. We're only human. And because we have our weaknesses, we sometimes fail to realize that life goes by so quickly. And if we don't do what is necessary to motivate ourselves, to draw some inspiration from some source, then we will be losing out a lot. We will not be tapping onto the real potential of what we can be and what a relationship can be, whether it's the relationship between us and our spouse or the relationship between us and God. We fail to realize the potential we have, how beautiful it could be if we only were continuously motivated. It would be a mistake to say that the average human being loses interest. The average human being becomes weak. Yoshua ben Nun needed to be motivated. He was first motivated by Hashem through Moshe, Rabbeinu telling him, Chazkeu ve'amtzeu, strengthen him. He's about to do war. He's about to do battle. It will take 7 years until he conquers Eretz Israel. Ups and downs, challenges. You know what war is? Many sacrifices, many difficulties, obstacles. Yoshua ben Nun needs chizukim. Later on, after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, Hashem tells him various times, if you read Sefer Yeshua, "Rak chazak ve'ematz me'od lishmor la'asot kechol haTorah shetzivcha Moshe avdi." Be strong, strengthen yourself, motivate yourself to follow in the Torah and mitzvot. Chazak ve'ematz ki ata tanchil et ha'am hazeh. You will be the one that will inherit the land for them. Lo yamush sefer haTorah ze mipicha. Make sure that the Torah is not forgotten. Therefore, alot tziviticha chazak ve'ematz. In order that that should never happen, be strong, motivate yourself. If one does not motivate himself on a regular basis, what happens is what the rabbis warn us was one of the things that made Hashem the most upset. That these people, as the prophets have mentioned several times, these people, the Jewish nation, continue to observe mitzvot, but not in the ideal way. Like mitzvot anashim melumada. Mitzvot anashim melumada means by routine. They're used to it habitually, but not with excitement, not with the proper understanding and attitude that this is so important. How could I ever give it up? When something becomes routine, it's already at the brink, chaz v'shalom, of losing respect for it. So you wonder how somebody can come to despise the mitzvot? This is the way it begins. When a person little by little does things out of routine without proper understanding of what he's doing and without continuously motivating himself. In our generation, unfortunately, things have become a little bit more serious and have deteriorated to the point of where many Jews have not only lost interest, they're no longer connected to the Jewish people. Many mitzvot, unfortunately, have lost the value that they used to have. Hasidim of 200 years ago, if they would be alive today, some of the rabbis said, they would be the greatest leaders and the greatest rabbis of the generation. These were Hasidim followers. Their devotion, their prayer, their mitzvot was so elevated that we don't even come close to that. So the rabbis described the generation before Mashiach as Chulsha tered la'olam. There's a certain weakness that has come down to this last generation right before Mashiach. And as a result of this chulsha, many observant people who keep Shabbat and keep everything will be weak. We're not talking about those who are not, but even those of us who are observant will become weak in our resolve, in our commitment. Part of the reason that I'd like to share with you of why this is happening today, in general, chulsha, the weakness, has to do with many factors, but one of the factors, believe it or not, is the television and the internet that occupies people's time and interest. And that time and interest that should be devoted to other more important things in life is robbing us or depriving us of where we should be investing our time and effort. And I'm told that today there's a very important gathering in New York, which I even thought myself of attending, an important gathering where thousands of Jews, I heard that there are about 50,000 tickets that were sold. There's no room to attend, to hear words of inspiration about the dangers of the internet. That's pretty much what the topic is. And for those of you who can't make it to New York, if you can get there by 7 p.m., there is something here in Canner Hall, I'm told, at 4 p.m. that you can attend, and perhaps it's a live connection. I don't know the details of, but it is a very, very important area that needs to be heard. For those of you especially who have internet in their home, for yourself or your kids, to be aware of the dangers. It is a powerful, powerful technology that can do a lot of good. No denial in that. And they'll mention that in their speeches, the rabbis. But they will make us aware of the dangers that lurk outside that we're unaware of. And what steps can be taken to minimize, of course, that dangers. To eliminate it completely, it's almost impossible. There are many people who use internet for their work. But nevertheless, to be aware of what can be done to protect ourselves and to protect our families from the dangers that, unfortunately, we are being exposed to. So some of the chulsha, some of the weakness that came down to this world has to do with that. So now the question is, how do we fight? How do we fight against these big dangers? How do we deal with them? I'm not here to give you all the answers and all the explanations, but I thought of one that I believe can make a big difference in our life. And I'm not only talking about internet and TV, I'm talking about any addiction, any weakness, any addictions that a person may have. An addiction does not have to be drugs or alcohol. It could be to some bad habit. A bad habit, anger management. You can choose whatever you want. Any weakness that a person may have he or she has had a hard time dealing with, what is a good way of dealing with it? And one possible way is called commitment. Commitment means promising. It's almost like a neder. You're going to say beli neder, but you're going to promise to yourself. And you're going to make it hard for yourself to break your promise. You know, some people want to go on a diet, but they're invited to a wedding, and when you ask them why you're eating so much, so they tell you, well, my diet starts tomorrow. That's not called commitment. Commitment means taking it seriously and starting yesterday. Okay, not tomorrow, not pushing it off. If it's very, very important to you, you start right away and you make a commitment. Commitment in such a way that you won't break it unless it's an emergency. Commitment is very powerful. Commitment is so powerful that the rabbis sometimes gave a blessing to someone who needed one on condition that he make a commitment. And I want to share with you an example of a commitment, which this story does not only give us this example of commitment, but it's also a story of Chizuk, of inspiration, of the greatness of the tzaddikim, and of the greatness of Shabbat. It happened years ago, maybe 100 years ago or so, that a little boy was born in Vilna. And he had mum balev, he had a heart defect. And they did not know at first how serious it was. Obviously he was having trouble maybe breathing. They noticed something was wrong. They took him to the best doctors in Vilna. And the doctors back then, as much as they could diagnose, they did not have the technology we have today, but they knew about the heart. They could detect symptoms that the heart was not healthy. And the doctor said, I'm sorry, but I have to break the bad news to you, to the mother and the father, but your child will not make it too long. With this kind of a problem, a heart defect, his chances for survival are very slim. Maybe a couple months, the most. This is terrible news for parents. So what do? They were heartbroken, but they got some encouragement from a neighbor who says, not too far from here is the city of Radin, where the Chafetz Chaim lives. Go to his home. Try to get in, try to get a blessing from him. Chafetz Chaim was already an older man. He did not receive people so easily. It was very difficult to get in. But they had what is called a little bit of protectia in Hebrew. They had pull. And what was the pull? There was a time when one of the nephews or the grandchildren of the Chafetz Chaim stayed over in their home. And because of that, they asked him, they begged him, please convince your grandfather to let us in. Please, we have an emergency. And he was able to get him in. And the Chafetz Chaim turns to the mother and says, do you take upon yourself that every Friday you will bring in Shabbat? You will make all the preparations for Shabbat. You will prepare the candles, not light them, prepare the candles, prepare the table, prepare all the food. By 12 o'clock, midday, 12, 1, midday, even though Shabbat is at 7 or 8, you make sure that hours before, early on Friday, the whole home is ready. Do you accept that? Do you take that upon yourself? If yes, I can give you a blessing. And she did. And Baruch Hashem, the child felt better and was doing better. So they took him back to a doctor's visit, and the doctor says, this is not the same child you brought me last time. I didn't even tell you how bad it was last time. It was even worse than I described it. He had very, very little time left. So what happened? He said, we got a blessing from the Chafetz Chaim. We made a commitment. So this doctor was a secular doctor. But he apparently had some belief in tzaddikim. And he said, we doctors, we can give medication to make the heart stronger, but we don't have the power to replace a bad heart, a defective heart, with a healthy heart. That only the Chafetz Chaim has the power to do. This woman, the way we heard about this story was about 50, 60 years ago when this couple has moved to Israel, to Yerushalayim. There was a gentleman who was close by to their home, and he saw how the woman was pressuring her husband right after Shachrit in the morning on Friday, 8 o'clock. You're going to take care of the shopping. Make sure you come back soon. Make sure you come back quickly. What's the hurry? And when he was not back at 9 o'clock, she was already standing at the front door waiting for him. Lady, what are you so anxious? The day is long. It's only 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. No. She started telling him the story of what happened years ago in Vilna, that she made a commitment and she was so afraid of it. This is a commitment, a true commitment. You're anxious. You're serious about it. You don't want to, chas v'shalom, break your commitment. So this coming week, Motzei Shabbat, we are going to be doing that, B'ezrat Hashem. We're going to be making a recommitment. Chag HaShavuot means that we take upon ourselves, we reassume our responsibility to commit ourselves to Torah and mitzvot. It's not just a celebration with cheesecake. It's a commitment. It's a responsibility. That's what it is. People forget about it. And this commitment really should be done, as we learn in the halacha, on a daily basis, especially for men. Commitment on a daily basis to accept upon ourselves the all Torah mitzvot as though today we received the Torah. It should be as exciting as it was back then. But the only way this could happen, where we feel the same as back then, is if we're motivated. So now we've come to the most important part of our talk is, okay, if motivation is so important, how do we accomplish motivation? Where do we draw inspiration? So I came up with a list of 5. I'm sure there's more. But here's a list of 5 that I believe could greatly help in motivating ourselves for all the 4 items I mentioned in the beginning. Number 1 is what all of you are doing here today, saying Tehilim. Tehilim, but on condition that we understand most of the words. Now I just gave you a big challenge because most people who read Tehilim don't understand what they're saying if they're reading it in Hebrew. And Hebrew is of course the right and the better way to say it, even though you may say it in the language of your choice. When we understand what David HaMelech is saying, those beautiful words, those powerful words, there's no doubt in my mind that they will leave a tremendous lasting impression upon us. Understanding the words as much as possible, take an English translation or whatever translation you want, and from time to time try to understand what you're saying, and you will see not only how beautiful, how strong, and how inspirational it is. Saying therefore Tehilim on a regular basis is very, very motivating. Number 2, reading stories of tzaddikim. From time to time, once a week, try to read a story of it. There are many, many books on stories of tzaddikim, the righteous that lived generations ago, whether it's the Baba Sali, whether it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whether it's the Baal Shem Tov, anything, all of them are good. There are many, many inspirational stories that you can even download from the internet, believe it or not, as long as you know where you're going. Beautiful stories, inspirational for ourselves and for our kids. They make a difference. After all, we all have moods, and I guarantee you that even if you're in a bad mood, you're in a sour mood, you don't feel so good, after reading such a story, it does wonders. Number 3, reading the Agadot of Chazal, reading many of the Talmudic passages that deal with Agadot, with stories that Chazal documented to infuse in us and to imbue in us Yirat Shamayim. The Agadot, whether it's in the Midrash or whether it's in the Gemara, were intended to inspire us. And they're very inspirational. There's tremendous Musar Haskel, tremendous moral lessons to learn from them. Number 4, very important for us to, from time to time, learn about Midat HaBitachon. Midat HaBitachon means the characteristic of trust and reliance in God. A lot of us have emunah. We believe in God, but not everyone trusts and feels that he can rely on Him 100%. Sefer Chovat HaLevavot is one of the most powerful sefarim that is easily accessible to most of us. It's in various languages, duties of the heart, that inspires us and teaches us how important bitachon is and how to develop that bitachon. People who don't have bitachon in Hashem will lose hope during difficult times. So from time to time we need to learn these kind of books that strengthen us, especially in the area of bitachon. And number 5 is what the Navi says will be necessary, especially before Mashiach comes. Ish et re'eu yazoru, uleachiv yoman chazak. Each one to each other, each one to his friend, should be a source of inspiration. What does that mean? You know of a home that is about to fall apart. It's breaking down. Couples about to get divorced. Couples having a hard time making ends meet. They're going through very difficult times. They need chizukim. Ish et re'eu. A good friend, a good neighbor, that is what he's supposed to do. Especially if you have contact with someone and you know of their situation intimately, then it's our duty to do the most we can. As the rabbis tell us, when a poor man comes to your door, you can do a lot more for him by saying to him words of encouragement and uplifting his spirit than by giving him your $18 check. This man needs perhaps $25,000 to replace a kidney. Your $18 will not make so much of a dent. But words of encouragement, Hashem is with you, Ultimately, it's not the doctor's turn to him. He can make miracles. Don't worry, you think I'm helping you, you're helping me. You're being mezakeh me by giving you tzedakah. These are words of encouragement. Offer him a glass of water. In the same way that the rabbis praise as greater than the giving of the actual money, the more so when we can make a difference in a couple, in a family, by giving them words of encouragement that not all hope is lost. Ishet re'eu yazoru, people need inspiration, not only from books, but from others who can give it, who are calm, who can sit down and spend time with them. I assure you that the more we become inspired and motivated to do mitzvot and to learn Torah and to commit ourselves to the mitzvot, there's no doubt in my mind that motivation will bring about pride. It will bring about pride to the point where we will feel sincerely, Baruch Elokeinu shebaranu lichvodo v'hidilanu min hatoim. We will be so proud to say the brachot. We will be so proud to be Jewish. We will be so proud to celebrate the holidays. We will be so excited to wake up every morning and saying Shelo asani goy. These are the results, the positive results of being inspired, is to be proud, to be a proud Jew. And God willing, the more Jews we impact with this pride, the more Jews we gladden their hearts, and the more Jews we inspire, then very, very soon we will all, B'ezrat Hashem, not only receive the Torah, but receive Melech HaMashiach b'mehera b'yameinu.